going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here, and if you've been here with us throughout the day, I hope you've enjoyed the day, enjoyed our summit that we've put on. Again, I'm Kyle Hansen. I'm the CEO at Utah Valley Hospital, and we're now at the end. We've got our closing keynote speaker, and we're excited to hear shortly here from him, and I'll introduce Dr. Martin here in a moment. But a few just roundup items that I can leave with you. Just a reminder to please fill out your evaluation forms for us. We will post the links to these keynote sessions on our website, as we mentioned earlier, and that will be utahvalleyhospital.org/mentalhealthnight. Again, those attending in person can complete the printed version of the online or the evaluation form, and everyone will receive a link to complete one online as well. So appreciate your feedback so that we can continue to make this event more effective and more useful, but it's been great. I mean, what a great opportunity to come together as a community and learn about mental health, right? We've all got opportunities in our own lives to get better at this for ourselves personally and for those who we have stewardship over, whether that's our family or congregation or a classroom or something else. So thank you for being here. And then one last plug for our wonderful 211 number. Just as a reminder, 211 is our county resource line. So it is manned by United Way of Utah County. You can dial this number to ask about resources related to mental health, and you can also visit their website at unitedwayuc.org. Okay, it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sheldon Martin. Sheldon's a clinical mental health counselor focused on integrated care solutions through products and technology. He graduated from Arizona State University with a doctorate in integrated behavioral health, and his work has focused on using technology to reduce healthcare costs, expand treatment, and improve care. He has conducted research, worked in private practice, and led large organizations to address mental health for a worldwide audience effectively. He has also been a featured speaker on Hope Works from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Although these accolades give Sheldon credentials to speak on specific subjects, his real professional love is people. Helping people is his business and his life's mission. And whether done through publishing, speaking, designing products, and treating or educating, his life's work is people. He finds excellent life fulfillment in helping others. The people that mean the most to him, no surprise here, are his family. So his wife, Nicole, and his children are at the center of his focus. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Sheldon Martin.
Thank you. I was very flattered with the invitation to even come and speak at what a wonderful organization and what a wonderful event. My work often will take me into communities where I'm able to observe and see if we can help with public health and healthcare. And this type of event and the efforts that exist in Utah are rare. When I mean rare, I mean in the good sense. They are unique. To have a governor and a current governor, former governor, as involved in a task force in suicide prevention is not a common initiative that gets as much attention as it has in Utah. And I just am so thankful that as a community, we can come together and we can reduce stigma, bring awareness, and start to understand how collectively we can improve wellness. And so the title of this, I is long and lengthy. It sounds, that's not going to be anything that flies off the shelf. But there's something to that title that I want to focus on. When we say mental health, it is a very, very broad umbrella. Often there's kind of some buckets that I just simplistically put some efforts into, and that is prevention, intervention, and healing. The first thing I would say is, as a community, I believe it is extremely important that we recognize those three buckets and not treat any one of them as if they are the silver bullet solution. So let me give you an example of a silver bullet solution. Of course, there's research that is based in physical activity and how that impacts our emotional wellness. But you could see how we could take that too far, and now jogging is the silver bullet intervention to address mental health. And what often happens when we do that is we then get extreme spectrums, where we'll have people saying, no, it's more complex than that, you don't understand, and not even consider an intervention. Or someone else saying, no, this is the clarion call, right? This is the only thing that we need to do. And so as we approach this, I would suggest that we recognize those three buckets. Now, the other thing that I'd like to do as way of kind of an introduction to this topic, I know we've all been to conferences or seminars or classes, and we come out with 23 initiatives to implement over the next quarter, right? and we're going to measure these with metrics, and all of a sudden we're going to be better. Sometimes a situation like mental health, the complexity of it, the one challenge is if we spread the efforts too thin within our own sphere, nothing moves. As a wonderful example with this conference, I really cannot imagine the amount of effort and energy and I'm sure legislation and that went into such a simple, memorable solution of 211, but the complexity behind that, I can't even imagine how much energy that took. But often something that is simple, that is memorable, that we could hang on to, may be extremely impactful and might be the thing that kind of moves the needle in our sphere of influence. So my only solution, I'm speaking down here in Utah Valley, I think that it's like you're required to quote Stephen Covey, right? I mean, these are our people, right? I mean, this is, if I were somewhere else in the country, we'd quote someone else. But I do think that this quote actually is extremely profound. And the main thing, by the way, could be different for every single one of us. Right? I think that the collective energy of us having a main thing is what's going to work together to reduce stigma, to bring awareness, to increase the awareness of resources. And so you've heard this quote, I'm sure, many times, right? The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. The fact that we have in Utah now a number of 211, the road has not ended. The energy is, oh, wow, that is amazing. Well, there can be a new energy to ensure that people are aware of that. And that is really difficult. Even though the solution is fabulous and simple and memorable, creating awareness can be extremely difficult. So we could play a part and look in our sphere and say, maybe that's something I could do. I know that we have professionals who are therapists. We have interested parents. We have school teachers. There are so many different elements on how we could impact this space, and there's no way we could give a presentation to understand all of the ways we could do it. So my invitation really to start is to implement or re-engage in one thing. Just the energy of each of us walking away and saying, I could do this differently or re-engage in it, or I can bring more energy to this, and that can make a difference. The organizations that I observe that make the greatest impact over a period of time are usually very subtle or simple changes, and then they stay on message, and it takes multiple times to do that. I have such great respect for colleagues and professionals who have studied and given their life's work to treating mental illness and addressing mental health. I have such a respect. Colleagues that I meet with, I just think, man, they are smart. They are really smart. To try to take that complexity and to spread the complexity of a level of understanding through community messaging and community efforts is a really difficult task. Maybe we could focus on if someone needs a professional, how do we get them to the resources? How do we get them to the professional? Because they probably didn't go to school for 12 years for really simple tagline solutions. There's more complexity involved. Great. But we could bring the resources together in a way that could be really effective. So I want to talk about prevention. When we talk about prevention, there is, maybe you've seen, diagrams such as this. The reason I show it is not to highlight that diagram. It's an example. It was mentioned that part of my background in studies is in integrated care. And that could be debated on what level and, how does that impact, and that's not the point this evening. Integrated care, in my view, wellness is impacted by a variety of things. Okay, so the challenge with having the silver bullet solution that's going to be the cure-all for everything is it cannot account for the hundreds of variables that are possible. Imagine in your own life, if you were to take one of those domains and just try to think of the most significant or traumatic thing that could happen in one of those domains, right? If you were to take, occupational. Some of us could imagine a scenario where things could change this next week that would bring a level of stress to our life that would be pretty overwhelming, insurmountable, right? But the solution's not going to be, we have to make sure everyone is gainfully employed. Does that make sense? How these elements work together. As a community, we could probably go around this type of diagram and others and start to recognize that there is an element in which maybe we operate in a little bit more often than others. So what can we do within that sphere? How do they work together? How would we be able to impact in just a small way something that we could do? So kind of a key element here, I think, is to recognize that wellness is often holistic and cannot be reduced to one area of life. So with that, I think that there's a key element that we could start to think about as a community. Now, this is one of the 23 initiatives I was talking about, jokingly, right? But this might be something that sparks interest in your area. It is pretty well documented at this point that you've heard terms such as growth mindset, or, growth is a positive principle that positively impacts our wellness, our mental wellness. That is a simple message and sometimes more difficult to implement. But start to think about your sphere of influence and how if growth was at the center of the bullseye, how things might be a little bit different. When I remember one year I coached one of my sons in baseball here in Spanish Fork, and there was a draft night, and all the players tried out a few days before, and you go and you draft, and they have a coaches meeting. And the coaches meeting, they basically told you, all the things from the previous season that they don't want coaches to do. Don't yell at the umpire, he's 14. It was that talk. I'm sure you've seen this. But I thought, wouldn't that be great if we could pause for a minute and have someone do just a very brief emphasis to help someone understand that for a 10-year-old, that if they can feel growth, like that's really the take home, that it's going to be better than winning the city championship, right? That they're as a coach, of course they want to strive to win, but this is an element that we want to highlight. That if you see them growing, you point it out. If you see them improving, you mention it. If you see their effort, you highlight it. 10 minutes and move on, right? That is one simple thing a community might do. A teacher might look and say, we have academic standards that we have to meet. We have benchmarks. It is part of what we do. Is there 5 to 10 minutes in a day when we can think of something that helps a child recognize growth and how to grow? I heard someone say recently, I loved this statement. Have you heard the phrase, anything worth doing is worth doing right? Right, you heard that phrase? This wonderful woman, she's a clinical psychologist. She said, I hate that phrase. And it's pretty funny. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Because you're always bad at it when you start. But if it's worth doing, it's worth sticking with. And I thought, it's brilliant. It's really true, right? If it's worth doing, it's worth being really poor at it. And that's okay. Kind of keep trying, keep leaning. And so for communities, I think just maybe even pause and take a moment and think, okay, why am I here at this conference? What's my sphere of influence? For overall wellness, is there an area where we could highlight growth as opposed to simply outcome or achievement? I recognize that there are things with achievement and other elements, they're already built into the system. So we sometimes have to force the other part, right? I'm sure many of you have seen the very famous TED Talk now at this point by Carol Dweck and her work and the work with Angela Duckworth and others. But in Carol Dweck's TED Talk, I think she has a couple actually, but the one that's the most famous when she kind of introduces this growth mindset, she talks about the not yet principle. And she tells a story that is extremely inspiring. There was a kindergarten, first grade class in New York, in the Bronx, that was the lowest, most underperforming elementary school in the nation. And she said many of the children, first grade, they didn't even know how to hold a pencil. I mean, this was a very new concept to them. And they implemented this not yet concept. That when they would do something and it wasn't where it needed to be, oh, not yet, let's just keep trying, No problem, let's keep trying. And they did this studies in this little elementary school. They finished in the top 10 by the end of the year, nationwide, in their achievement testing. And it's just a fascinating study where they changed their emphasis to, we're going to just keep trying. We're just going to keep pushing. We're just going to keep making an effort. And it impacted achievement. Okay? So the first thing I would say with prevention is, are there areas where we can look in a variety of ways and highlight growth more than just outcome or achievement? The second element is intervention, a crisis. This is probably, and rightfully so, but probably the areas where we have the most of our efforts. And as mentioned, probably rightfully so. When someone is in a moment of crisis, what do we do? The complexity of, especially if it's extreme, if someone is considering harming themselves, it is very difficult to teach the complexity of what to do in that moment community-wide. But there are ways to simplify the message and reduce it to such a point that maybe it could stick. Things like 211. We can remember that. I'm not proposing this as, hey, adopt this as a new model, but as an example, the ask, care, tell model is something I think a high schooler could remember. The model is simply this: ask. Ask someone directly if they are thinking of harming themselves or if they are okay. And may we message and help people understand that asking someone directly does not increase the likelihood of suicidality. And we can just work to kill that myth. Asking someone directly does not increase the likelihood that they're going to harm themselves. So we could help communities have the courage to say, hey, are you okay? Is there something I can do? Second aspect, care. Take seriously what they're about to tell you. There are times when someone, when asked, will be very open with you. It is important that we listen. Listen genuinely. Try to understand. Hear them. Listening is one of those things that it already is starting to produce an outcome. None of us like or enjoy being told a quick solution when we're sharing our complex situation, right? We've all been there. It is really, really difficult, right? When you're trying to express a vulnerability to someone and their response is, oh, yeah. You know what you got to do? You got to jog more. Right? We've all been there where they have this quick fix. Here's what you do. Yeah, you should do that. Listening and taking very serious what they say is a wonderful place that we can be, and we can teach people how to do that. Then, tell. Not gossip, but tell. Tell someone who is in a position to support that individual. If it's a crisis, you may be the one that needs to call 911 or 211. Depending on the severity. You may be the one that is going to help teenagers understand that it is better to save a friend and tell than it is to keep a secret. There are things we could teach our community to say the most kind and loving and compassionate thing you could do as a friend is you tell someone that can help them if they are in a moment of need. That is the most kind thing you could do, even if they get mad at you. In fact, it's kind of this true element of love, right? Some of you who are in relationships in your life, you understand this. Sometimes the most loving thing you do does not make the person happy, but it's extremely kind. One of the saddest things I've ever witnessed or been near in my professional life are moments when someone makes an attempt or they are trying to harm themselves, and they start to recover in the hospital. They start to emotionally feel better, but their body is not able to fully recover. It is a very tragic moment. It's difficult. It's heavy. There is a moment when we can tell and say, making sure this person is safe trumps everything else. I think that's a message that we could do. I think that's something as a community that we could understand, that we can start to work towards. Okay? So what's a community, element? Is just very simply, right? We could ask people if they have a plan to hurt themselves or to harm themselves. We can listen. We can give them time to explain. We can take every discussion of suicide or suicidal ideation seriously. This is one that I really wish would land in communities. I hear this common response when we talk about public health is I'll have a participant or someone raise their hand and the question goes something like this. Well, what if the person's just trying to get attention? Usually I'll reflect and say, do you not see that as also a very dangerous behavior? That I am willing to tell someone I am going to harm myself so that I get your attention. So we don't have to be a filter. we can get help for them because that also is a pretty extreme behavior. Even if they're not serious about it and they're the only ones that know that, they probably need some additional professional support in their life, and we might be in the position to help them with that. And then to encourage the person to tell someone, which may be appropriate depending on their response, or you take that role in telling someone. So what can we do? We can organize around simple, memorable solutions. We can remember 211 in our congregations. We can remember Ask, Care, Tell in our schools. We really can. And so you think, okay, what is one thing, right? What is one thing that I might be able to do in my sphere of influence where I could, what could we do? We could put up a poster at school, Ask, Care, Tell, talk to the students about what it is about. We could put something up in our church. We could put a flyer. I mean, there's so many options that we might be able to say, we want to ask, care, tell, or here's a number, 211. We can remember this. And the energy now has to be put into helping spread that word. Right? Let's spread the simplicity and leave professionals to address the complexity. Okay, that is really important. Most public health initiatives that fail and fail quickly are the ones where they try to roll out complexity. When they try to roll out a plan that only those who wrote it understand it. They're brilliant many times. Just very knowledgeable, have spent years of their life dedicated to a cause, and they're trying to do a mind dump so that everyone knows their cause. And it just fails. They can't get it off the ground. No one's going to remember it. Okay, so think of simple, right, memorable solutions that we could implement at a local level. So I recognize, both on the stream and those who are here, that when we talk about healing, the first thing to mention, and this also comes back into the space of crisis or intervention, but it's the message, I hope, is just consistently choose to stay. I hope that as we reduce stigma, that it also can increase the resolve of someone choosing to stay because they feel there's less of a stigma to deal with if they don't. Those who are hurting, please reach out to someone. People care. One of the hardest things is when, either through distorted thoughts or overwhelming emotions, it is hard to see or feel that people care or people are close. It is very difficult to see. There's often it comes a very narrow thought process. Just please, anyone on the stream or here, just believe me that just please choose to stay. And with time, it can get better. It really can. It does not mean it's simple. But please choose to stay. What can we do about this? Can I make a few statements? And I am not here. I'm not a political guy. So what I'm about to say has nothing to do with politics, our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or anything, okay? But if you own a gun, you should have wonderful gun safety. There aren't redos. If you own a gun, you should, I believe, have wonderful gun safety. If you are fearful that a child or someone near you may use medicine or other means to harm themselves, then Walmart has lock boxes for $18. Just lock them up. Even if it's Tylenol, do what you can, because we all know that in a moment of vulnerability, we can make irrational decisions. And we need to help limit a little bit as best we can. We cannot prevent everything. But as best we can to limit the risk that may come from someone making a decision in a vulnerable moment. Okay? It is so much more likely that a child or a teenager will harm themselves with a gun in your home than you have to defend your home from those breaking in. And proper gun safety, you could do both, right? You can do both. And I think that it's something we can encourage, we can message as a community. I think that's something that we can do. Okay? Could I also mention with this, there are two populations that are more vulnerable with suicidal ideation and suicide, and that is all very consistently youth. And then the other group that we often forget about is the elderly. COVID is a lonely time, more lonely for some. And I think that think of what is one thing I could do. My family situation, when COVID kind of started to hit and we were, quarantined and those things, we had all kinds of people in the house because that was our situation. I had social interaction with human beings every day. Usually me saying, hey, we still got to do chores, guys. Even though it's a worldwide pandemic, we got to do chores, right? But I was talking to people every day. We saw quickly that some people would go weeks or a month with never talking to another human being. And they were alone. Think of one thing that we could do in our sphere of influence. Along with healing, though, I want to be very sensitive to something that I know is a reality because of the applying statistics to a population. We've all had someone who is near us that has either died by suicide or is going through a very difficult moment because of mental health or mental illness. I have this statement up here, with time the intensity may soften, but some pain may never leave, and you should not feel that that is an expectation. I don't know if it ever leaves. It changes over time, but I'm not sure. For me, it's never fully left. There are smells, or there are dates, or there are things that will just trigger a memory. Or someone who's close to you who may not be near you anymore, it just comes back pretty fast. Maybe we can have more compassion with recognizing it's okay sometimes to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay on some days. The other element of this is something I feel we really can do as communities. Is what I mean by the ripple is we live in a wonderful community, by the way. And I guess on stream there's people joining us in other communities as well, and I imagine they're wonderful. But here in Utah County and throughout the state of Utah, we do have wonderful communities. Quirks, of course, but wonderful communities. We really do. There are resources available. There are parks. It's safe. I mean, these are wonderful, wonderful communities that the whole world doesn't enjoy. And so what happens is often if there is an acute need, people rally to the need. Sometimes, how many of you have been in the spot where you want to help, but you're not quite sure what to do, right? One of the elements I think we could improve on as a community is when someone's going through an acute moment, if they have the resources they need, we can proactively look at possible ripples. We have some amazing principles in the state of Utah. I love the ones, I love all of them that I interact with, but I love the ones when there is a tragedy in the school, they proactively reach out and say, we want to make counselors available. We want to recognize that a young person who a friend had a tragedy that we can do something about. We can ask if we could help. Often, those ripples are the individuals who often face some of the most vulnerability because they're just kind of lurking in the middle. They're not close enough where all the acute attention is applied to them, but they're close enough that it hurts. And they're not quite sure how to react. Maybe think, is there one thing we could do to support when a tragedy happens or when someone's going through a difficult time? We can support them. Many times we can apply resources in an acute moment, and we sometimes forget that a year later there still may be some things, some challenges going on. More than a year, but I think that it's important when we look as communities about healing that we take the long-term approach. The long-term approach often is one that is more helpful, meaning we don't have to show up on the doorstep and have the thing they need to do now to make everything better, but that we're consistently near when we can be. This is important, that it takes time, and it's okay that it takes time. When I have a wound and it heals, I can usually still see the scar, but it does heal. It starts to heal. It starts to improve. And so I think that there's things that we can do in this realm. So if we could kind of go back to when we started. If we look at these areas of prevention, intervention, and healing, there's different things that we might apply to our sphere of influence. We can promote growth and highlight effort in a variety of areas. There are way too many to even list. But just think, how can we do this? How can we talk about this? How can we reduce stigma? How can we promote good mental wellness? I'm not sure if any of you saw the NFL special that they did this year. It was fantastic. They've added into rookie camp now mental health awareness. And they did a fabulous job, by the way. And they have some real advocates within their league. It was very well done. If you have not, go onto YouTube and watch some of these videos. Wonderful, right? The rookies come in. They just signed a check. I mean, they are excited, and they talk to them about how to manage their finances and how to some best practices being in the NFL. And some gutters. And they spend a whole day talking about mental health and talking about how they must reduce stigma. What a wonderful idea to promote wellness. So think of your area of influence. What could we do, right? Intervention. What is a simple solution that could stick in your sphere of influence? If it's a school, what is something the students remember? If it's a church, what are something that the congregation could remember? Right? What is something that we could remember? Because in the moment, we're not going to remember complexity. Does that make sense? What's interesting is when you take a topic like mental health or suicide or other types of topics like this, it's very interesting that you can kind of gauge the resources and then go back and look at individuals who engage in the resource and do some surveys and ask them some questions. What's interesting is they will often rank mental health or suicide or some of these topics very, very low in their life when they're just kind of living life. And in the moment of crisis, it's number one. It just switches very, very quickly on them. The important part with that is recognizing when that switches and they're in a moment when they need something, they have to have simplicity to get them started. Okay, there's some great interventions you can do here. Part of my background is with telehealth, and there's pros and cons, and I recognize that. Okay, but as an example, a city could do something like this. We now have software that is HIPAA compliant, has a waiting room. You're able to let people enter at will, and so sometimes parents just have a question. They don't know who to ask, right? I could see a city allowing, maybe they pay a mental health professional or something to be logged on for someone to come and ask a question. Well, how would we verify that they're, a member of the community? They just show their driver's license. I mean, it actually is not as complex. We might be able to look at this, right? Well, what if the person's in real crisis, right? Well, they showed you their address, right? And they're in your town, and you call emergency services. Professionals know how to manage that. I met with some law enforcement who mentioned that one of the saddest things that they face is when they respond to a call and their options are ER or jail. And one particular officer said, there's got to be something else. We've got to offer something else. Think about that. There might be something that we have people already in the community engaged in this and saying, oh, is there something we can give this person? Okay? Healing. Proactively identify the ripples, right? Allow people time. Kind of take the journey with them, right? It's okay to not be okay. We don't have to have the solution. We sometimes just have to be close. So with this, I really want to just highlight and kind of close this session this evening with one. I really, and for those watching the stream, I do think we need to do this. Not all communities do this. I think we need to give a round of applause for the hundreds of hours that people spent in putting on a conference like this. Is amazing. It is amazing. It is rare. It is only effective if the conversation goes on. If not, the circle's too small, right? How do we keep this going? How do we talk about this? We live in a new era. Some of our old explanations don't apply to situations of today. What do I mean by that? When people start to say, oh, they have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and work harder. Well, then it doesn't explain the use cases that we see, where individuals are successful and should be fulfilled in all areas of life and wealthy, and they didn't escape. They didn't need to work harder. You saw the conversation. You saw what it turned to. When athletes in the Olympics and others saying, this is something in my life, right? I saw a lot of divergent comments. I'm not being judgmental by saying that, but I thought, man, if she broke an ankle, these comments would not be said. We can do better. We can do better. So, with that invitation, my hope is that we can go back where we started. Choose one thing. One thing to do. Or one thing to re-engage doing. And as we do that, I really do believe that we are getting better at this as a country and as communities. And we definitely can continue to get better. Thank you.
And uplifting, and I think we all feel the same way. So a lot to learn there. Thank you very much. All right, that's the conclusion of our summit. We really hope you enjoyed your time with us today, and that you are able, as Dr. Martin said, to find one thing to take away. It's great. It's great that we have individuals like yourselves that are here. You're here because you care, and that matters. That's meaningful. And the only way that our community continues to get better at this is to have people that care and are willing to make a difference, like yourselves. So thank you. We'll, again, urge you to fill out the evaluations and wish everybody safe travels home tonight. Thank you.